I remember my high school graduation day like it was yesterday, even though it was a very long time ago. I graduated from a small private school, and when I say small, I mean there were only 11 people in my graduating class, which made us all a genuinely tight-knit group. On graduation day, I remember the plethora of emotions that I'm sure are common, such as feeling of accomplishment, freedom, and the excitement of the adventures that await. My graduating class, all of us celebrate each other's future plans for successes. Some had plans for college in a faraway state, and others didn't quite know their plan. Either way, we were all happy for each other. We were all especially proud of a fellow classmate who was offered a full ride to a very well-known college across the country on a football scholarship. This classmate joined our school during senior year, and by what can only be a miracle from God, took our losing football team all the way from last place to the winning championship. This classmate was one of the most talented football players I had ever known, and on top of that, he was a true example of what a leader should be. He always helped others, and he had a humble spirit and a sweet soul. He was the type of player and man who, under every circumstance, led his team to shake the hand of the opposing team before and after the game. He was the kind of person who you just felt happier by being around. And as we said our goodbyes that day, I couldn't help but feel blessed that I got to know him and the excitement to watch his future journey. He was the kind of person that you really believed would not only reach for the stars, but would grab them as well. A month after graduation, my parents told me the news of his car accident and the coma he was in. As months went on, it was helpful to keep an update on his mother's MySpace page where she would update us on his recovery, and yes, I said MySpace. He slowly was recovering, but football was off the table at least for that year. As time went on, life went on like it does, and the busyness of my new life kept my young mind and head preoccupied. There wasn't a need to keep in touch with my high school classmates. It was kind of less and less a thing since I was making new friends and I was on to new adventures. Flash forward a few years. Yes, we were 21. You would see most of my graduating class reuniting at a bar after we received the news that our star quarterback had overdosed on opioids and died. Apparently, he became addicted to opioids after his crash when he was prescribed them by doctors. And according to his mom, he suffered and struggled with his addiction until his addiction ultimately won. Even then, I didn't realize the true crisis our country is in. As years went on, a few similar stories would occur in my life regarding opioids, but I still never fully recognized the outrageous and disheartening facts of the opioid crisis in our country. As years went on, I came across numerous situations similar to my story that I just told. One of my sister's friends overdosed from Oxycontin. He was only 16. One of my best friend's sisters became addicted to opioids, and through the years I watched the pain that was caused to my friend and her family by her sister's addiction. And most recently, one of the busboys at the job I worked at suddenly died from an overdose. It was his first time taking the drugs and only time. Even after many occurrences, I still didn't fully comprehend the danger of opioids, and I don't know if it was my ignorance or if it was something I subconsciously wanted to ignore because it was too painful to accept how serious this problem really is. Flash forward to just a few months ago when I started my Capstone 2 class and was asked to join a group with numerous topics to study. I chose the group addiction because I figured it would be the easiest to research, and I, for some reason, got this thought in my head that my group would want to pick the topic I wanted, which was to lay focus on stimulants like Adderall, but I'm sure glad majority ruled and we focused on the subject of opioids. Now I had no choice but to educate myself on the reality of the severity of the opioid crisis in America. I went down the rabbit hole, and honestly, I have been in that rabbit hole to this day, which is why I chose to focus this conference on the information my group and I researched and the surprising facts and realities that came within that. Out of curiosity and hopes to provide you with a presentation that I hope grabs your attention, I interviewed many people who have either dealt with opioid abuse themselves or have or had a loved one who did. For the respect of these people, they will remain anonymous. I even sent a mass text message to over 50 people in my phone, simply asking them if they have been affected by this crisis, and literally 45 out of the 50 people responded with heartbreaking stories. We have been told numerous times during our graduation program that we now have a social responsibility to spread our newfound knowledge to others, which is why it's my hope that after viewing this presentation, you will gain awareness and insight, and we can all be able to help combat this horrible drug crisis that is going on in our country. Knowledge is power, and I feel like it is my social responsibility to share with you the newfound information that has ultimately consumed my thoughts for the past few months. So let's get started.
All right, everyone, we are live. So this is my presentation on the opioid crisis in America. We're going to start first and go to stats and facts. So 63% of overdose deaths are from opioid abuse. The opioid crisis has become so widespread that it has lowered life expectancy in the United States. So what is an opioid? By now, I'm sure a lot of us know what an opioid is, but just for a quick refresher in case anybody doesn't. So, opioids are a class of drugs naturally found in the opium poppy plant. Some are made from the plant directly, and some are made by scientists in a lab using the same chemical structure. Opioids are used as medicine for pain relief, so they contain chemicals that can relax the body and relieve pain. They are usually used to treat moderate to severe pain, but there are some that are used to treat mild pains as well, like even just coughing. Opioids can also make people feel very relaxed and high, which makes them very addictive. And this reason is why they have become extremely addictive and are often not used for medical purposes or prescribed to users by a physician. Their non-medical use, prolonged use, misuse, and use without medical supervision can lead to opioid dependence and other health problems. And they're very dangerous. So this is why opioids are extremely dangerous and lead to a lot of overdose and deaths. Thus is why our crisis is in country. Our country is in crisis. I'm sorry. I just wanted to put right here some common types of opioids: Vicodin, OxyContin, Percocet, fentanyl coating. So just in case anyone didn't know about that. All right. So let us go to the opioid crisis. So overdose in the United States.
My son, Christopher Parado, was 20 years old when he was prescribed opioids. It took him 5 days to get addicted. I'm not supposed to be the one to go get his suit and tie and pick which sneakers that I'm going to bury him in. My son overdosed at the age of 22 years old.
So opioid-involved overdose deaths rose from, if you can see that number right there, 21,088 in 2010, almost doubled to, or more than doubled to 47,600 in 2017, and it's remained steady in 2018. This was followed by a significant increase in 2019 with nearly 50,000 overdose deaths. So how did this happen? In the late 1990s, pharmaceutical companies reassured the medical community that patients would not become addicted to the prescription, and that equaled healthcare providers. They began to prescribe them at greater rates. And this led to a widespread diversion and misuse of the medication before it became clear that these medications could indeed be highly addictive. And just to kind of show you where we're at now, in 2017, an estimated 1.7 million people in the United States suffered from substance abuse disorders related to prescription opioid pain, which is a huge amount. So 192 people die every day from opioid drug overdose, which I thought, just to put that in perspective, is pretty crazy. Here is a chart you can look at. And I also want to keep in mind, I didn't say this earlier, I want everyone to keep in mind that if anyone would request any of this information or a copy of this presentation, I'll have my information at the end so you can send it. I just don't want to spend a lot of times on all the pictures, but I do have all of this that I could send your way. This one kind of got me too. The economic burden of prescription opioids misuse in the United States is 78.5 billion a year. Like I can't even personally comprehend how much money that is. That's just crazy. So let's go over here to who's at risk. So who can overdose on opioids? Honestly, anyone. I talked to you earlier about how a busboy at my work tried them for the first time just at a party and he overdosed. And so most opioid overdoses are accidental and they can happen anywhere, anytime, and to anyone. However, there are certain groups of people who are at a higher risk of experiencing an opioid overdose. And so people who are most likely to overdose on these drugs are those with the substance abuse disorder. So substance use disorder are when people become dependent or on alcohol, prescription, drugs or illegal drugs, and it may result in mental, physical, and behavioral problems at home, work, or school. So let's talk a little bit about the people who are at the highest risk. So the first one, so relapse to opioid use after detoxing people overdose because they resume their regular dose, and which now is too strong for their tolerance level. And then the next one, so other people who mix opioids with other substances, such as alcohol, cocaine, or other stimulants. This picture I have right here, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar. His name was Corey. I think it's Monty. Not sure if I pronounced that right. It's a very tragic story. He was on a show called Glee, super talented, had the world at his feet. He was engaged to be married. He was found dead in his hotel room from an overdose. The autopsy found out that he died because he had detox previously when he had addiction, and he took the amount, that he thought his body could handle, and it obviously couldn't. And plus, he had other substances mixed with it. Very sad story. So number 3 would be high dose prescription. Number 4 is those who inject opioids, which may contain other illegal or more potent substances such as fentanyl. 5 is people who have underlying chronic medical conditions such as HIV, liver disease, lung issues, or mental illness. And the last one is people who will have access to opioids, including those prescribed by a doctor or someone in their household that might have them. All right, let's move on. We're going to go real quick to some other stats. So these are just some current stats that I had looked up that, I thought was pretty interesting. So the likelihood of developing an opioid use disorder depends on many factors. So including, the length of time a person is prescribed to take opioids, the acute pain, the length of time that they continue taking them. But just to show you some statistics over here, roughly 21 to 29% of patients prescribed opioids from chronic pain misuse them. Between 8 and 12% of people using an opioid for chronic pain develop an opioid use disorder. An estimated 4 to 6% who misuse prescription opioids transition to heroin. About 80% of people who use heroin first misuse prescription opioids. Hospitalizations are much more serious for opioid poisoning than for other poisonings, with 37% of opioid poisoning patients needing medical ventilation. What I thought was really interesting about that is there's a new study done, and 22.4% of patients were still able to fill a prescription for opioid pain medications after serious hospitalization for opioid abuse, which just seemed outrageous to me. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but the total cost of opioid poisonings is around $504 billion and $78.5 billion a year. Okay. Next, we are going to move to a section. It's one of my favorite sections. This was the surprising finds that I had found and my group had found during our research. Although it might not be surprising to some of you, I just thought this information is really valuable to have.
We were driving to the supermarket, and as we entered the parking lot, a car ran a stop sign and completely T-boned us. When I was first prescribed my prescription pain meds, there was nobody to tell me that these have a really high potential for addiction. How can I be addicted? I get these from my doctor. It kills your soul and it makes you feel worthless.
All right. So in 2018, it was reported that 100 million opioids were prescribed to post-surgery patients in America, and half of the prescriptions were unused. So the improper disposal of these opioids was the information on this was just crazy to me. So interviews with these patients showed a lack of understanding and proper disposal of medication. So for example, stories range from situations like a patient using only 2 of the prescribed pills and giving the rest to a friend, or a patient only taking a small portion of the prescribed opioids and leaving the rest in the bathroom cabinet. So improving appropriate disposal strategies could really help decrease death rates among young adults and people in general. So the highest chance of relapse is ages 18 to 25, and my group in Capstone 2 really focused on this age group because research shows that adults in this age have the lowest success rate responding to opioid addiction treatment. This age group has the greatest chance of relapse, and current research has concluded that young adults are more prone to helplessness, confusion, and concerns with treatment costs. And so redesigning and creating new strategies for the current treatment system could change the outcome for young adults who struggle with this opioid abuse. Another thing I had found really surprising that I didn't know about earlier was the dangers of synthetic opioids, such as fentanyl and methadone. They've caused more deaths than any other opioid. And these substances are synthesized to target the same places in the brain as natural opioids. The structure of the drug can be fundamentally altered, though, and these versions of opioids are popular with drug traffickers. This has proved to be extremely dangerous for young adults, especially with this age demographic being the biggest consumer of synthetic opioids. The last one that I found extremely surprising was dentists are actually the number one prescribers of opioids, more than any other doctor. So moving on, so some helpful tips. So spread the word, pass this on. These are a couple of things I didn't know, and I'm hoping it'll be new information to you as well. So when prescribed pain medication, you can only ask the pharmacist to fill in how many you think you will need, which most of the time is way less than what you have been prescribed. So at the very least, only take them out you're prescribed. If they prescribe 25 to you and you want only 4, take only 4. And guess what? You only have to pay for the 4. So proper disposal. So I hadn't learned about this earlier, and I'm so glad I did. I don't know, my pharmacist had never talked to me about this. So if your pharmacist doesn't have a local take-back program, I suggest the following method. You mix the medicine with something inedible, such as dirt, put it in a sealed plastic bag, throw the bag in the trash. All right, so next I want to talk a little bit about suffering family members. This is something that's pretty close to my heart, and I'm sure a lot of you have, dealt with similar situations. So suffering family members, a financial toll can take part on family members in different ways. I mean, I think that one's pretty obvious, but one being that if someone is prescribed opioids, the cost of the medication, on a regular basis, or another, if someone's addicted and buying off the street, a lot of times they will pay whatever the cost is, sacrificing family income that could be better used somewhere else. There's also the case in some families where the cost of rehab and treatment comes into play. So as well as the financial cost of the opioid crisis, there's a significant emotional toll that this takes on family members and greater society. Family members face irritation and helplessness even if they are well intentioned. They feel this way in part because of the barriers of treatment plans. Some of these barriers include but are limited access to long-term recovery programs, limited funding to certain treatments, and even lack of services for family members whose loved ones needs treatment. Family members are affected by their loved ones' lack of motivation or refusal to get treatment, as well as seeing their loved ones um, controlled by an addictive substance. A family member could also face the guilt of not knowing that their family member is addicted to opioids, since that family member could have minimized their substance abuse to preserve family bonds. Sometimes even opioid abusers who have the motivation to get better can be overwhelmed by a drug craving, and that could lead to relapse. So it is also common for that person with the substance abuse disorder to be forced into treatment by the legal system or employer, which reinforces the guilt that that person with substance abuse disorder already feels. Many families suffer in silence because there's a negative stigma of having a family member with a substance abuse disorder. So the death of a family member that had a substance abuse disorder is not viewed the same way as the death of a loved one who dies from other causes such as a car accident or illness. When a loved one dies from a substance abuse disorder, family members feel guilt that this could have been prevented.
My son Steve did not want to die. He wanted to get well. He tried really hard to get well, but his prescription opioids killed him. We found a Post-it note that he had written about his opioids. At first, it was a lifeline. Now it is a noose around my neck. You never expect that you're going to lose a child. It's all out of order.
I want to give a shout out to the CDC for those. They did an RX campaign. Very interesting. Sorry about that.
My son's.
I just want to point out real quick too, so in many circumstances, friends and family who've lost a family member due to opioid abuse and who know the situation are afraid to talk about the reality of how a person died, and a lot of times it's uncomfortable and awkward, which makes the grief period even harder. So a helpful tip after talking to many people who have lost a loved one due to opioid disorder, they provided me this advice to help them grieve, and they would like people to realize that just sitting with them in silence, silently in love, is all they really need. And one woman I interviewed who was a mom who suffered the loss of her child due to opioid overdose and would like to remain anonymous said in quotes, "Just listen if we talk and love us even if we don't talk. Please don't give us advice. Don't ask us to move on or get on with our lives. It doesn't work this way." Okay, the next one is naloxone, a life-saving medication against opioids. So another topic of information that my group researched was naloxone, which is the life-saving medication against opioids. So I put this nice little picture of Muhammad Ali because naloxone knocks the opioids off its receptors for a short amount of time, allowing the person to regain breathing and temporarily reverse the overdose. So just some notes on naloxone. The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, first approved this drug in 1971, in which it aimed to be an opioid antagonist and rapidly reverse an opioid-induced overdose. The Surgeon General in 2018 proclaimed the importance of distribution, understanding, and community awareness surrounding naloxone. Strong efforts are being made to not only educate about naloxone, but also to provide inclusive access to this life-saving medication. Despite law and regulations becoming normalized, as well as awareness becoming more widespread, there's still a lack of those who have naloxone in their possession. And research shows that individuals may feel reluctant to carry naloxone or to refill the prescription in fear of feeling stigmatized or harassed by law enforcement. So education is very much needed on this. Educating community members, law enforcement, and pharmacy staff can help aid the destigmatization process, which can ensure people have the life-saving medication they need. All right. So here are a couple step-by-step guides to using naloxone on someone who's overdosing, just in case anyone ever, comes in contact. So to apply through the nose, I'm not going to read everything on here, but like I said, I could definitely send these to you guys if you want to. But you would do rescue breathing first. You would pull the yellow caps off, attach the soft white piece, and then you're going to spray approximately half the naloxone into each nostril. If the person isn't breathing, continue to perform rescue breathing until the naloxone takes effect. Wait for 3 minutes. If there's no change, give the person another dose. And also one of the things is if there's still no change within the second dose, that can mean that the opioids are exceptionally potent and require more. It also could mean that this has been too long since their heart has stopped, or there's no opioids in their system, and opioids are not the cause of the overdose. Here's the other one. This is for administering it as an injection. So remove the cap, stick the syringe through the rubber stopper, draw all the fluid from the vial into the syringe. Make sure the syringe is filled with liquid, not air. Inject the syringe into a muscle in the shoulder or the front of the thigh. I put the quick tip up here, and then push down until you have emptied the syringe. If the person doesn't respond in 3 to 5 minutes, eject another dose. And one of the important keys is also to stay with that person 60 to 90 minutes after their injection. If you cannot stay with them, roll them on their side to prevent them from choking. Okay, so the next one we're going to go into is relapse and recovery. And we are going to start with relapse. So continued opioid abuse causes the neurobiology in our brain to change, and with addiction comes the potential for withdrawal and relapse. So opioid use disorder, we can call it OUD, is commonly known to cause a person a cycle of relapsing and remission in patients that undergo treatment. Studies have shown the following addiction rehabilitation: 50 to 70% of individuals relapsed within treatment. Yeah, within a year of treatment, I'm sorry. And withdrawal symptoms are very intense. So looking over at withdrawal right here, there are many reasons that one may relapse after addiction treatment or even struggle to finish treatment in the first place. Withdrawal symptoms can be too strong, stress, pain, or anxiety can become too overwhelming, cravings can be too powerful, and much more. So some withdrawal symptoms include aches, muscle spasms or cramping, anxiety, hot flashes and chills, and insomnia. Some medications assisted treatments, which is MAT down here, such as those involving methadone, are used to help suppress withdrawal. They offer a way to safely allow a person using opioids to stop and stay sober long term. Stress is a poison to someone's life, no matter who they are. I mean, we all deal with stress. I'm sure we all can relate to that. It's very hard to deal with. So, however, a person who has suffered from opioid use disorder and who is in remission has a much harder time dealing with stress. And research believes that stress is an increased risk for OUD relapse because the wiring in our brain that deals with stress and rewarding drugs use can cross paths. All right, so next we're going to go into prevention. So here are just a few extra goodies I've added. I won't go through them in detail in order to spare time, but keep in mind, if you'd like a copy of this presentation, I'll definitely be happy to send it to you. This is, a hotline number. Over here I have just 10 ways to prevent relapse. If we wanted to look over here. Here is a positive quote. These are recovery mantras that I found. I thought they were very, very helpful. So while relapse and withdrawal symptoms can become burdensome for many individuals, there is hope. And there are many local and nationwide resources, which we'll go over in the next slide. But For individuals struggling with substance abuse, such as inpatient rehabilitation facilities and outpatient treatment programs. And this hotline is a confidential, free, 24-hour a day, 365 days a year, information in English and Spanish for individuals and family members facing mental and or substance abuse disorders. The service provides referrals to local treatment facilities, support groups, and community-based organizations. Callers can also order free publications and other information. Okay, so next we're going to go to some recovery resources. So recovery is very possible, and there are endless amounts of resources out there for anyone and everyone. So here's just a page of resources that my team and I had come up with, and these resources mostly correlate with ASU, but keep in mind that in any state offers their own set of resources as well as resources online. But we were able to find ASU resources, things around local treatments, and many different websites were provided. So if any of you want more details on that, please let me know. All right, so next we're going to go into call of action. Attention, time for a change. This is a community call.
All right, Sun Devils, now that you are familiar with all this information, I humbly ask all of you to take action. So to combat the ongoing opioid crisis, there are 5 specific strategies that we can take. One is for better data by strengthening public health surveillance. Another one is better pain management. 3, improving access to treatment, prevention, and recovery services. 4, increasing the availability of overdose reversing drugs, which we talked about. And 5, supporting cutting edge research. But we can all make a difference by doing simple daily actions. So if we foster an environment that allows one person to feel more comfortable engaging, we will have made an important difference. It is my belief that education is the key, and that awareness and prevention are deeply intertwined. If nothing else, we can be a channel that arms others with important information about the scourge of addiction. Finally, I challenge my peers to speak up as well. I hope our peers will join us on this journey. Let's leverage our resources to advance this cause. As graduate students and citizens, let's come together and talk about the changes that are needed. This is something I pledge to do, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
All right, everyone. So this is the end. I want to just give a special thank you real quick to Danielle, Katie, Hannah, and Lily. They were members of my capstone too. So for my references, I just want you guys to know, obviously my capstone team won addiction, but here are my references right here. I obviously won't go through all of them for you, but like I said, if you guys want any of that information, please let me know. Here is my contact information, and honestly, you can contact me on my personal email. Here's my school email. Here's my LinkedIn link. If you click on that, that should send you there as well. I'm sorry about I very much apologize for my dogs at the end, but hey, it's 2021, and I think we're all used to these Zoom calls by now. But anyways, thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, like I said, please let me know. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation.